good morning. Welcome to episode 2 of Papa's Workshop. This is for Adam, Brady, Luke, and Brenna, and especially Brenna. Today, Friday, the 24th of April, 2020, is Brenna's birthday. So this is a special episode for Brenna. Today, I thought we'd talk about the power tool equivalent of the bench planes, which would be the joiner and the planer, which is off screen there. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, I had a question from the first episode about where my assistant was. Well, she's just laying right over there. Molly here has been my assistant for many years. She is one big helpful. She makes sure, she stands guard, she makes sure that no squirrels or rabbits or birds or anything else that might crawl into the workshop. So she helps me. She's especially attentive during break time, in case a squirrel might come in and try to steal my snack. But she's a big help. She's always around. Sometimes she gets right under my feet, and just in case a squirrel might appear, I guess. But the two of us work on all of our projects down here. Okay, now that we've got Molly under control, let's talk about the power tool equivalent to bench planes. First is the joiner, and that's what's behind me here. The first step in making your project, after you've made your plans and you've cut all your material to rough size, is then you have to make it square. And by square, I mean you've got to have this space has got to be flat. You've got to make the other face of the board, you got to make it parallel to the other one, to the other face. And then you've got to make the edges at 90 degrees to the face and then parallel to each other. So that's the first stage before you do any joinery or anything. You got to make your stock square. Now you can buy wood that's already been planed. The problem is wood does not stay in one position. That changes in humidity, it will warp and twist, and you almost always have to make it square. So you buy a 3/4 inch board at Home Depot, you may end up having to plane that down to closer to 5/8 to get it square again, depending on the material. And here's how a joiner, it's much like a plane, a bench plane, except that you've got a cutter with usually 3 blades in it, and it spins this way. So it's turning this way, and then you have the bed of the joiner coming out like this. And so you push your stock across there. Now, unlike a plane, these two beds are not in the same. They're not at the same level. The outfeed. This should be the infeed. This is the outfeed table. That is right in line with the top of that blade. The infeed table is below that, and that's what determines how much material you're going to take off. So you can adjust that table up and down to take off, a big amount or a little amount, whatever is needed. So that's kind of different than the bench planes. Remember, where that was you just had the blade sticking down on that flat. These things are not terribly dangerous. Here's the you can see the cutter right there as that spins around, and this kind of protects you. The thing with power tools is what they call the 3-inch rule. You never get your hands within 3 inches of the cutter, whether it's a staple saw or the joiner or whatever, any power tool, you want to keep your hands well away from it. And that's what these are for. So we would take a board. This one's got a tab on it to help me push it through. So I hold the boards like this, and we would just run it through. I can't, because it's not on, I can't actually run it through, but that would kick out of the way, and we would just go on through. For longer stuff, I've got a longer one that allows me to do that same thing. So the first thing we do is we want to get this one face flat. So we've run that through the joiner, and once we're sure we got cut on all the way, because the board can be twisted or warped, and the first pass may not get everything. So once you're certain that you've got that one surface flat, you put a check mark or an X. You put something on there to tell you that that's your reference side. Now some people like to go ahead and then do the edge at 90. This is the 90 degrees. This fence determines that. So you put the face you just did against the fence, and you push it then against the fence and down, and you go through the joiner. So then you would mark that edge that you've got those two. I kind of like to make the other's face parallel before I do the edges, but that's just my quirky preference. So how do we make this other side parallel? If you're using the bench plane, say we've used the bench plane to get this flat, then we would have to take a tool that I'll have to show you later, and mark it. It's a marking gauge. Mark it all the way around at that same height, and then we would have to plane to that line. But on the power tool equivalent, we can use the planer. Okay, one of the limitations of the power tools is that they can only take boards of a maximum size. Hand tools, you can work on anything as long as you can work from one side to the other, so it can even be longer than your arms. This joiner here is an 8-inch joiner, which means I can only do a face of an 8-inch wide board. After that, they won't fit. Most people have like a 6-inch joiner, and they can only take a 6-inch board. Big shops, you can get them up to 12 or 16 inches wide, but that's for professional cabinet making shops. And you notice the table's really long, and it's just like the bench plane joiner. That's to make sure that you end up with a flat surface. When you run this through, you start out and you push down at the back side until you get about halfway through. Then you start putting the pressure down on the front side. This becomes your reference surface, and to go through there. If the thing was really short and you had a warp hanging out in the wind, you would never get a flat surface to reference when you went on this side. So that's why I know that doesn't really make sense, but trust me, you need a long table just like you do a long joiner bench plane. Now my planer, which we'll talk about next, it's only can take 13 inches wide boards. After that, I'm out of luck. So this coffee table I just finished, which is off screen, that's got a 24-inch wide top. So I have to finish that by hand. You can run, before you glue up the top, if you're gluing up a top, you could run each half through there, get them the same size, and then get it close. When you glue it, it may not be exactly the same. So then you have to go over it with the joiner hand plane to get it smooth. So that's one of the limitations of the power tools, is that they can only accept a certain size or less. Here's the coffee table I was just talking about, just a little quickie. It's got spiral feet instead of ball and claw, so they look like that. And they got a little carving up at the top. So That's what's possible using hand tools and power tools. Okay, this is my planer. So we would take our board that we marked that face is flat, and we would stick it into the planer like this, and it goes through and comes out the other side with this face being parallel. And the way that works is this has a flat table, and the cutter is up here. And these again usually have 3 cutters. And it's spinning this way. So you bring your board in through here, and there are 2 rollers that push down on the wood to keep it flat, and also move the board in that direction for you. So all you do is just stick it in, and it zips through there. And then you can adjust the height. Got a wheel here that adjusts how thick you want the board to be. These work really well. One of the problems with the planers is what they call snipe. Snipe is at the beginning or the end of the board. This is your reference side here, but up here, say at the end of the board, it'll have just a little area like that. It's just very slight, but you can see it, and that's caused by when it's only being held down by one roller. The board may try to pop back up. It's especially true if you try to put a warped board through there. That's why you should always run through the joiner first to get the board flat, so it can stay flat against this table. But that kind of is a problem. And you can get it on the joiner too if you don't have good technique in holding it through the joiner. And just like on the hand planes, there's a right and a wrong way to put the board through. On the planer like this, since it's cutting this way, you want to make sure that the grain of the wood is going up like this, right? Because if it's going the other way, you're going to get the same thing. If it's going this way and it's trying to chip that, it's going to chip those out just like it does on a hand plane, and you'll get chip out. And on the joiner, where the cutter's below, you want that board to be going this way so that you don't get that, because that's where you're cutting on here down at the bottom. So you want to be sure you got the same issue. So once you run it through the planer and you got the 2 faces parallel, then you go back to the joiner. If you didn't already, make one of the edges at 90. Right? So we've got both faces. This face and this face are now parallel and flat. We run them through the joiner and get this edge straight. Then the next one, to make them parallel, you got to go to the table saw and make that edge parallel. And that's usually what I do to get my board ready for the next stage of joinery. But if I'm doing it by hand, I'll just use the jack and the joiner plane to get it to this point. I won't use the smoother just yet. After I've done the joinery, even on these ones I've done with the power tools, I'll go back over it with my smoother plane and get all the machine marks out of it. I don't know if you can't probably see that on the film, but what happens is that with the power tools, since they're at a regular speed, you end up with little bumps across the top. They're slight. And when you go to if you put light across it, you'll see there's the marks from the cutter. So I usually go, when I'm all done with that particular board, before I glue it up, I'll take my smoothing plane and by hand and smooth those things out. Hope that makes sense. Next time we'll talk about saws, and how we would cut it then to length. And those are the steps you would do, and then we would start on the joineries, and then we'll talk about the joinery planes. Hope you guys are doing well. Looks like there's some light at the end of the tunnel with this virus thing, but it's still a pretty long tunnel ahead of us. Love you guys. We'll see you later.